Democrat voices. Democrat voices. Surely you all can do better than this.
So, Ben Dallas has been a loyal follower for, I would say, years, maybe.
Hi, Ben.
Yes. So, Ben actually reached out to me today and gave me permission to share this along with his name.
So, thanks for having me on. I really appreciate it. It's great to be able to defend my comments live on your panel with you. That's great. I haven't been a loyal follower for as long as you think I have. I actually stopped watching your channel about a year ago, I guess, or at least videos. I mean, I see some of your content online sporadically. I don't watch your videos anymore because about a year ago, you guys were blaming our record high gas prices and our record inflation on Vladimir Putin, literally mimicking every single thing that the Biden White House said, obviously because you all probably voted for the guy. Right. But I mean, you're parroting all of his talking points. So you're not neutral voices. You're more like Democrat voices. Obviously, that's just insane because you completely left out of your video that gas prices had already risen 50% before Putin even invaded the Ukraine. You left that part completely out. And you just blame Putin. You blame Putin because that's what Joe Biden does. Okay. That's not neutral. Okay, that's not only left, that's farther to the left than like Elizabeth Warren, right? So that's further left than the squad, further left than Bernie Sanders. So when you're that far to the left, you can't really call yourself neutral voices.
So last night, as Clarence recapped, we talked a lot about slavery. We also talked about education, why it's not spoken of a lot in schools, why it wasn't then. And why it's not now, and how they're actually trying to remove that history currently. So that's a fact. So Ben says, we learned the basics about slavery in school, like key dates and events, but nothing about Ben's, 11 of our 13 founders.
Let me stop you right there, Jill. If you live in this country, then there are your founders too. Our country's founders aren't divided on skin color, okay? Only in a liberal utopia would that be the case. So like during the slave years and during Jim Crow, that's exactly what you guys, liberals, wanted to do. You guys divided us with skin color. That's what you guys do. So no, they're everyone's founders. If you live in the United States of America, they're your founders too. Our founding fathers were also your founding fathers. They were everybody's founding fathers. Okay, the same liberals that were trying to divide us by race to keep slavery, okay? The same liberals that instituted the Jim Crow laws and founded the Ku Klux Klan, those same liberals and this liberal party, that's you guys, are trying to keep the divide. You want to keep us divided by these boxes that you put us in. We're not in any boxes. We're all individuals. We're all Americans. There is no difference between us. Okay, if the melatonin in your skin is all you can cite as a difference, you might want to re-educate yourself. Go on.
Wanting to abolish slavery prior to 1776, with the founders of Georgia and South Carolina being the only exceptions. Or how our founders added the 3/5 clause intentionally to give slave states less representation in Congress so that the non-slave states could eventually abolish it, as they did. I could go on and on. I personally don't know of any legislation on the books that's trying to take slavery out of schools or out of the curriculum. I do know that there is an effort to take the 1619 Project, but that's different than what you were talking about. That is nothing more than revisionist history painted through the lens of a single political narrative.
Yeah,
Ben is all the way. Like Ben, when Ben was born, he was born a Republican. It's on his birth certificate. Yes.
Yeah.
Thank you. Yes, Ben is a Republican. I am definitely a Republican. At one point, my channel was even called Conservative Nation. So yes, I am a Republican and you are a Democrat. Now, you don't want to admit to being Democrats, partisan Democrats. You don't want to admit to that because then you got to defend things, right? Then you got to defend the government that's currently in power, screwing up our country. Okay, but I love the attempt to discredit me. You guys discredit me immediately by saying Ben was born a Republican. Ben is so Republican, and we're just neutral. No, you guys are not neutral. You guys are left. You guys are all left. You guys are farther left than Karl Marx. Okay, half the stuff you guys regurgitate is right out of Karl Marx's writings, and you guys think that's neutral. Okay, the reason I stopped watching you guys over a year ago is because if I want to know what Democrats think, I'll just turn on MSNBC or CNN. No reason to watch your guys' show. For 4 or 5 Democrats all repeating the same stuff they just heard 2 hours ago on MSNBC. But go ahead.
But first and foremost, let's go with this. He said we weren't taught about the 11 out of 13 that wanted to abolish slavery prior to 1776. In our government, it says majority rules, right? So if 11 said let's end it, and 2 said no, why wasn't slavery ended before 1776?
I'm not a mathematician, but that's a great question.
That's
a great question.
And
so you're not a mathematician. Okay, I gotcha. But you're also not a historian, apparently, or someone that even knows the very basics of American history. So we had this thing called the Revolutionary War. So I know you're not a mathematician, but that's after 1776. So before the Revolutionary War ended, for those that know the basics about history, Great Britain ruled us. We couldn't rule ourselves. That's why we fought the Revolutionary War. So perhaps you guys should take a step back from the 1619 Project, perhaps learn real history, not revisionist history, because obviously none of you have heard of the Revolutionary War.
You got to take everything. Everybody has an opinion. Everybody has an idea, and everybody can research what they want to research. But let's make common sense statements when we make those. If reason it wasn't taught, because it didn't happen. If we had 11 people saying, let's stop something, and we only got 13 in a pile, who's going to make the decision? What is going to change? It should change. It didn't. So what does that tell us about America?
Right. And in history, we don't, you can dig for it and find it, but in history, they don't really talk about the things that almost happened or that maybe could have happened. And the thing is, our show wasn't based about the white people we didn't talk about. It was based on slavery.
No, your show is based on Democrat propaganda. But I stand corrected. See, when I sent that comment to Jill via Instagram Messenger, I was kind of doing it off the top of my head type of thing. It was actually 10 of 13 founders, were against slavery. And I'm going to do something right now that Neutral Voices has never done. I'm actually going to put the link below this video of my sources, right? Because they're telling me that I lied. They're telling me what I said didn't happen. Okay, so there's a bill that Thomas Jefferson wrote. It was meant to end slavery. Okay, they obviously couldn't end slavery because we were still ruled by Great Britain. So you want to talk about common sense statements. How could you have a common sense statement when you completely forget the Revolutionary War? How can you forget about the Revolutionary War, not add that in its context to what we're talking about? Because it has everything to do with what we're talking about. So I digress. Click below this video and you'll see the sources for the bill that Thomas Jefferson came up with. Okay. And then another writing, according to James Madison. James Madison said there was 10 of 13 founders. He actually said the founders of South Carolina and North Carolina and Georgia were the founders that were against ending slavery. Okay, this is according to James Madison. He's one of our founders. He probably has a little bit of insight into what the founders were thinking when they founded this country. So don't take my word for it. Take their word for it. Okay, you can either look at my sources, do your own research, come up with your own conclusions, or trust these guys' opinions. You can't defend the 1619 Project and then claim to know anything about history, because the two aren't mutually exclusive. The 1619 Project has been proven time and time again to be just left-wing propaganda. So when you hold that up as if it's history, and by the way, it wasn't founded by just black people, but a lot of white liberals that made the 1619 Project. So they say, I believe he says the 1619 Project, the black people's version of history. Let's look at the people that wrote the 1619 Project. They're not all black. They're mostly white liberals. That's just a fact. So let's not pretend like 1619 Project, like that represents black people. It doesn't. It represents the people on the radical left like you.
So, a lot of times, Ben, we always respect everyone's opinion, but in my opinion, this time it was just kind of like a deflection from what we were speaking on.
A deflection on what we were speaking on. Okay, Jill. A lot of times Jill likes to speak out of both sides of her mouth, but when I sent her this on Instagram Messenger, here's what I wrote, and here was the reaction. So you'll see there's a little heart around her reaction. She loved what I said. So I guess, do you love deflections, Jill? Wait, there's more. So in response to the response that she just read to everybody, she wrote, no, that's what I want. A different opinion, perspective. Everyone has a different opinion at a different perspective, or on a different perspective, because we are all human. We have different things that occupy our minds, but people are afraid to disagree. And if people are afraid to disagree, we cannot have discussions, and therefore no progresses. There she admits on Instagram Messenger that she liked my response. But on the show, she calls it a deflection. Weird. Kind of reminds me about that one show she did about a year ago or so, where she was demanding that all white people pay reparations. She was pushing for reparations according to skin color. But then her own panelists asked her, what reparations is she willing to pay? Is she willing to give up something in her life that she got because of her own self-proclaimed white privilege? She said, no, not me. I won't give up anything. So she always wants somebody else to do something, but not herself. That's Jill, again, speaking out of both sides of her mouth. Okay, so you got to take that with a grain of salt whenever she says anything. She's mostly trying to fit in with the panel. She's just saying whatever will give her the least amount of, I guess, confrontation while she's on the panel. She really has, she kind of parrots other people's opinions and doesn't have a whole lot of her own. I digress. Let's watch the rest of this.
Yeah. And so just even with that being said, there were so many other stories connected to slavery, yes. Even as we were talking about, just like the mining, the slaves that they had under the ground doing the mining in those conditions, with the water and different weather conditions, rain, snow, etc., explosives happening. Nobody talked to us about that in school. We didn't know about that. I'm saying there's so many other stories, like we were talking about people selling the slaves to companies or leasing out slaves, people being enslaved even after they were free. I'm saying there's so many other things that we could have learned in school.
That we
didn't.
And I got to flip for Ben too. Why haven't we learned about all the slaves that staged revolts? Year after year after year after year after year after year. We don't hear about those. Those didn't make the history books.
No.
What about the leaders that said we're not going to do this? There's so many, like Dr. V said, there's so many layers to it, but we're just going to pick one, and say, well, they didn't talk about this. They didn't talk about a whole lot. There's a lot out of our history books that's not in our history book.
Right. So I believe I mentioned in my statement that I could go on and on. So the few examples that I listed, again, were off the top of my head via Instagram Messenger in a random response. So yes, there's a lot we could talk about that's not in our history books. Okay, I'm not saying that my few examples were everything that's not in the history books. That's the way you're trying to frame it, along with trying to discredit me because I admit that I'm a Republican, while you still can admit that you're a Democrat. So, there's always going to be things that are not in our history books that we need to add, right? But the 1619 Project is not it. It's been proven time and time again to be revisionist history. Okay, it's not accurate. It's actually a lie. And it has the premise that slavery started with white people, white Europeans that were in the Americas, which is not true. Slavery that came to America started in Africa. Most people that don't live under a rock and don't just watch MSNBC all day know this, right? So slavery started from Africa. Okay, it came to America. We were the third nation as a whole to ban slavery. That's a pretty good track record. We would have been the first nation to ban slavery, but Great Britain wouldn't allow us to do it until we won the Revolutionary War. That's a fact, not my opinion. It's called history.
But on the middle of that, he said about no legislation.
Yeah.
Not in Indiana. And I can say as of yet, I don't think any has passed. But go read what Ron DeSantis in Florida introduced. They don't want to teach Black history in the schools. They don't want to even, Arizona was the last state to adopt Black History Month because they didn't want to teach Black history. Texas is at a point where they're doing the same thing. In parts of the critical race theory, that is part of what they don't want to teach.
Right.
They want to make everything seem equal throughout. I'm not saying that's the whole thing, but if you read what they're saying, they want to seem like everything was equal and balanced throughout. So those are, I don't know any that passed, but those are the legislations that are in front of people that can pass, that can change the course of, learning about Black history.
Hold on right there, Mr. Stats. Let's talk about the truth. Okay, so no, Ron DeSantis, and Governor Abbott, they're not trying to ban Black history. Okay, they're trying to get rid of the 1619 project. Okay, the 1619 project is not Black history. That's something else. That's MSNBC, CNN propaganda, liberal propaganda. That's all it is. That's all it's ever been. Okay, so no. You can't equate Black history to the 1619 Project. Half the writers of the 1619 Project are white liberals. It's just a fact. Okay? So no, it's not Black history. It's liberal history. It's history viewed through the one political lens, the liberal lens. The same people that wanted to keep slavery. The same people that wrote, enforced, and introduced the Jim Crow laws. Democrats, liberals, people like you, because you don't know history. That's why you're still a Democrat.
Well, and I want to go back just real quick to the founder's comment. So he said that was prior to what,
1776?
Okay, so these were founders like a long time ago. People basically who were, somewhat in power. So now we are in the way past 1776, and I'm going to call some of our founders people that are still in power. So I ran across something that was it Mitch McConnell? What was he, like
he's a senator in Kentucky.
Okay, so he has he's in power.
Yeah, been there for years.
He actually said recently, not in 1776, that he's not sure why Black people can't get over something that's been over for hundreds of years, and he said this publicly. So I mean, we really haven't, I don't know, I don't want to say we haven't came that far, but
we haven't,
but really
that's
what I want to say.
The current people in power right now are not our founders. Okay, Mitch McConnell is not a founder of this country, and by the way, most Republicans despise Mitch McConnell. He's a poor example. There are very few Republicans that like Mitch McConnell. He's horrible. He's a rhino. I can't stand him. I think he's every bit as bad as Chuck Schumer. But I digress, because right now, Mitch McConnell's not even in power. He's just a senator. He's the minority leader. Chuck Schumer is the majority leader for the Senate. That's the guy that's in power for the Senate right now. Not Mitch McConnell. He's just a senator. He's the minority leader. He means nothing. And Republicans hate him anyways. Oh, and another guy in power. I don't know, Joe Biden. He's the president of the United States. He's the guy that every single person on your panel voted for. I don't know about Jill. She kind of says she didn't vote for him, but she agrees with everything that he says. So whatever. I know at least 99% of your panel voted for Joe Biden. Joe Biden eulogized a Klan member, Senator Robert C. Byrd. He was an active Klan member of the Ku Klux Klan. Okay? He's a Democrat. He's part of your political party. He's the guy you all voted for. Okay, why didn't you mention him? So you mentioned the minority leader of the Senate saying saying that Black people should get over something that happened hundreds of years ago. I don't know if I agree with that myself. I really don't. but it's not as controversial as eulogizing a Klan member. So if we're going to use examples, let's use real examples that mean something.
And before we go to the next comment, he said the 1619 Project is a revisionist. You know, as white people have made programs and movies and documentaries about slavery from their point of view, you know, it's everybody's opinion, everybody's objective. You know, you can't say one is right because the history in Doc V, we talked about this, about the first person that got the patent, the first one. Our records wasn't kept correctly. Mm-hmm. So we don't know chronologically or who was the first, or, you know, because records weren't kept properly when it came to black people.
And we know their birthday.
Right. So we don't know the whole story because the white people are not telling the whole story. So we piecing it together from one perspective to another. So it's just what you want to believe.
Yeah, absolutely. That's why I said it's like the black culture, like we're adopted.
Hold on. You know? What do you mean the white people aren't telling the whole story? Half of the writers of the 1619 Project are also white. They're white liberals. Okay? So you have a lot of white people that also wrote the 1619 Project. So let's not pretend that the 1619 Project represents black people's version of history. No, it doesn't. It represents the Democrats' version. The Democrats' version of history. And in case you don't know, they're the ones that founded the Ku Klux Klan. They're the ones that implemented. They're the ones that wrote and enforced the Jim Crow laws. They're the ones that tried to keep slavery an institution. They're the ones that didn't want the Civil Rights Movement, the Voting Rights Act. They didn't want any of that stuff. Those are the people that Martin Luther King was fighting against, Democrats. People like you that don't know history are also Democrats. So let's put things in perspective before we start talking about something that you have no idea what you're talking about. The 1619 Project does not represent you. They don't represent black Americans. They represent Democrats. It has nothing to do with white or black history. Okay, it has to do with Democrat and Republican, just like the Civil War. The Civil War wasn't about the North and the South, because if you really look at history, right, not opinions about history, but actual history, there were slaves in the North too. There were parts of northern states that were Democrat run that allowed slavery, okay? It was about Democrats versus Republicans. That was the Civil War. Okay, if you don't know that, then you don't know history. If you don't know history, then you're wanting to repeat history. Okay, that's why Democrats, people from your party, are trying to tear down statues of Abraham Lincoln, George Washington. Okay, they're great people in history that even tried to end slavery, that did end slavery, like Abraham Lincoln, because they're trying to tear down their statues. Why? And most of the statues you're tearing down, okay, a lot of them are statues of Democrats. People that represent you. They're just regurgitating opinions of people in academia who know nothing about history. Okay, they just read Howard Zinn's opinion. Howard Zinn is the number one historian in academia. He was a member of the Communist Party. He hated America. And that's who these people kind of regurgitate every time they talk. So, yeah, they're not neutral voices, okay? If you haven't figured it out by now, they're Democrat voices. Okay, that's about all I got. And as always, stay informed, folks.